If you want to learn the handstand but you keep failing, this video is for you. Back then in 2019 I started to train the handstand. I had no idea how to train it. I was just spamming it hours every day after school and it was a real pain. I had a lot of areas in my body that felt really stiff, like my neck, my wrist. And then I came across a specific book called The Handstand Instruction. If I translate it into English, this would be the name. It included a few exercises. I did those exercises and it changed everything. My form was extremely bad in the beginning of 2020. And then I used these exercises in order to correct my form and to get a better handstand. And just a few weeks or months later, my handstand improved drastically, not because I doubled the work, but because I did the right exercises. If you know exactly how to train the balance, the endurance and the technique of the handstand, you're going to make so much progress in a really short period of time without experiencing too much pain in your body. So if you want to learn the handstand in an efficient way without exhausting yourself to the maximum, keep watching, because in this video I'm going to share everything that you need to know when you first start out with the handstand. And don't worry, you don't need to be extremely strong, you just need to be familiar with a few push-ups and then you can already start with the first drill of the handstand. And let's dive right into the tutorial. One last thing before we dive right into it. First of all, you need to know if the handstand is actually the right skill for you, and that's why I have a quick checklist. So what are the prerequisites for you to be able to start practicing the handstand? First of all, you need to be able to train at least 3 times a week for around 30 minutes or maximum 1 hour. This is more than enough for you to learn the handstand. Except from being able to train it 3 times a week, you also need to have a floor, you need to have a wall, and then it would also be great if you have 2 arms that are not broken. And then you can already start practicing the handstand. Before we go into detail, you need to understand that the handstand always consists out of 3 different parts: the balancing part, the alignment part, and the endurance/strength part. If you first start out with the handstand, you always want to train these 3 parts of the handstand in the exact same order. You always want to start focusing on the strengthening part, because the strength is your foundation of the handstand. When you train the handstand, you are first of all going to get it with bad form, and that's why you also need to have some strength in order to compensate the lack of balance and the lack of alignment by using some strength that you have already built through doing exercises like pike push-ups or regular push-ups. And once you can hold the handstand for a few seconds, that's when you can start to work on your alignment specifically. And here are the goals that you want to achieve in this exact order. The first goal is to hold the frog stand for 10 to 30 seconds. The second goal is to hold the wall handstand for 10 to 20 seconds. The third goal is to learn how to lift your legs off the wall and to hold the handstand for at least 5 to 10 seconds. Goal number 4 is to get your first bad form freestanding handstand for 5 to 10 seconds. And once you can hold it for around 15 seconds, that's when you can start to focus on cleaning up the form. And then the 5th goal would be to hold the clean handstand for 5 to 10 seconds. And now let's dive straight into the routine that you need to follow when you are still a complete beginner that still needs to work on the foundation. No matter how advanced you are, your training is always going to look like this. It starts with 10 minutes of warm-up, then you go for attempts or progressions for around 20 to 30 minutes. It can also last 1 hour depending on your current stage. And then in the end, you also do strengthening exercises that specifically strengthen the skill that you want to have. So doing overhead pressing exercises, for example, and then in the end, in the complete end of your training, you also include some general strengthening exercises if you still want to do them. In the warm-up, it's extremely important that you also warm up the right parts that you need for the handstand. There's not much use in doing jumping jacks for 5 minutes like a clown. You just need to warm up the right parts, like your shoulders, your elbows and your wrists. So how does the warm-up looks in depth? First of all, you can start with shoulder rotations. So you just do a few circles with your arms. Like this, you really increase the blood flow of your shoulders. Then you do some elbow rotations, some wrist rotations, and then you can also use the resistance bands in order to do shoulder dislocations. This is also an extremely important exercise because it strengthens your mobility in the shoulder, which is also extremely important for the clean form that you want to work on later on. So it's going to build up the foundation mobility wise as well. For your wrists, you can also do this mobility exercise that you see right there after you have done your circles. And then you do some head rotations, and maybe you do some push-ups afterwards to increase the blood flow overall, and then you can straight go for your attempts or your progression. If you still have no experience with the handstand, just start with the easiest progression, which would be frog stand attempts. This exercise is extremely specific and it's still extremely easy for a beginner. So you can learn the frog stand in just a few hours or in a few days. Why is this exercise so useful? Because first of all, you learn how to balance the handstand with your fingers. So if the weight moves into the direction of your fingertips, you learn how to push into the ground with your fingertips. And if the weight moves to the palm of your hand, you learn how to push into the ground with the palm of your hand. And then you can translate this knowledge into the regular handstand. If you want to increase the difficulty of the frog stand, just put your knees onto your elbows. Then you can also go to the wall with the stomach against the wall, and first of all, you want to spend some time in this position, and once you're comfortable with this, you can also start lifting your feet off the wall. Go really slow and controlled and feel how the weight moves to the palm of your hand. Once you have done your attempts of the progressions, that's when you can start to do some strengthening exercises 3 times a week. So you start with the most difficult exercise like pike push-ups or even handstand push-ups against the wall, and then you can continue with dips, for example, or regular push-ups, and then in the end you also want to do at least 1 or 2 sets of hollow body holds for 20 or 30 seconds. Once you start to feel comfortable at the wall handstand, for example, or once the frog stand becomes way too easy for you, you need to adjust your training. You're not going to make progress if you always continue doing the same things over and over again, because you always need to train at the edge of your current capabilities. So if the wall handstand gets too easy, start lifting your feet off the wall and max out the holding time. Or what you can also do is to just attempt the freestanding handstand by kicking up into the handstand and by trying to stay in this position for as long as possible, no matter how the form looks like. If your back is bent, if your arms are bent, if you are walking in order to stay in this position, it's all fine, because it's part of the process. You first want to get the skill, and then once you have it, you want to start to correct it. So now it's the phase in your training where you are strong enough to hold the handstand, but where your technique is still not there and where your balance is not there. And now, before we go into the alignment part of the handstand, you first of all need to understand how to balance the position properly. You need to understand that there are 3 different stages how you can balance the handstand. The first stage is your hand. If your weight moves forward, so into the direction of your back, you need to push firmly into the ground with your fingertips. You also want to bend your fingertips like this, because like this you can exude much more pressure into the ground in a way more efficient way. If the weight moves into the direction of your stomach, you want to push into the ground with the palm of your hand. It's actually similar when you are standing on your feet. If your weight moves even further to the direction of your stomach, you can also use the second stage, which are your elbows. So you just want to bend them slightly, and then you want to bring yourself back into the right position. But if your elbows also can't handle the disbalance, you can also use the third stage, which are your shoulders. So what you want to do is to just lean forward a little bit, almost like in a planche, and then you bring yourself back into the right position. If the weight moves into the direction of your back, you want to open your shoulders. First of all, you want to really balance the position no matter what. So use these 3 different stages. If you want, you can also use your legs or your hip, but I don't really recommend you to do this. And now you can also understand why it's important to have some strength, because bending your arms with your whole body weight on top is going to require some strength, or leaning forward with straight arms is also going to require some strength. And that's why you need to have some general bent arm and straight arm strength before you attempt the handstand, because you're not going to be able to do it perfectly right away. You're going to make a lot of mistakes, and that's why you need to use these 3 stages excessively in order to balance the handstand, and having some general overhead pressing strength is really going to help you to deal with those huge mistakes that you're going to make in the beginning. Now where you are able to hold the handstand for 15 or even 20 seconds with bad form, you can start to focus on your alignment. And now I'm going to explain in depth how to position all of your joints in the right way in order to be as efficient and clean as possible. Most of your handstand holds are going to start with the kick up. So what you want to do is to place your hands shoulder width apart on the ground. You want to bend your fingers slightly. You want your fingers pointing forwards or maybe slightly outwards, but not too much. And then you want to kick up into the handstand in the right way. And here's exactly how to do this. So you first of all want to push tall with your shoulders, and then you want to kick up one leg while focusing on bringing your center of mass up as soon as possible. You want to bring your center of mass, so your hip, on top of your shoulders as fast as possible. Once you have achieved this, that's when you can pull up the second leg into the right position. And now let's go into the right positioning of the handstand. You already know how to position your hands on the ground, so let's just skip this part and go straight to the second joint that you need to position, which are your elbows. You want to always lock them out, and you want to have a slightly external rotation, but not too much. It should still feel natural. Then you also want to elevate your shoulders, so you really want to push up with your shoulders. One more extremely important thing is to don't look at the wall or at people that are walking behind you. It's only going to irritate you. It's way easier if you look at the ground, at the spot right between both of your hands. Now let's continue with your stomach. A lot of people are going to tell you that you need to have a lot of core strength in order to balance the handstand, but it's completely wrong. You only need to have as much tension as when you are standing on your feet. Now let's continue with your hip. You don't want to be in an anterior pelvic tilt position or a posterior pelvic tilt position. You want to find a neutral hip position that is right between those two extremes. You also don't want to squeeze your glutes or your legs or any part except from your shoulders. And here's one extremely important cue that helped me tremendously to get a clean line in the handstand, but also in the one-arm handstand. Just imagine yourself being a line that points straight to the sky. Like this, it's extremely easy to position all of your joints perfectly on top of each other because it's the law of least resistance. If you imagine yourself being as tall as possible, the easiest way to make this happen is to position all of your joints in the most efficient way. So just point with your feet towards the sky and extend your body to the maximum. Like this, you're going to be in a really great line. If you do everything I've told you, but you still are in the banana position, chances are that your shoulder mobility is still not good enough, so you need to work on it every freaking day. One more bonus tip: if you're not making a lot of progress, always ask yourself, what is your weakest link? What is preventing you from making progress? Because a skill is only as strong as its weakest link. It's like a chain. The chain always breaks at the weakest part. So you need to identify this weak link of your chain, and then you need to make it strong. So you need to find the right exercises that are going to strengthen your weakest part. If it's strength, just go to the wall, for example, and hold the handstand for 20 or 30 seconds. What you can also do are handstand push-ups against the wall, or pike push-ups, or regular push-ups. So if you are weak, you want to focus on these drills. If you are strong and you kick up into the handstand with a straight line, your problem is usually the balance. So in this case, what you can do is to increase the volume of freestanding handstand attempts while reducing the form. Or what you can also do is to go to the wall and to focus on lifting your legs off the wall while focusing on balancing the position. What you also can do is to maybe take a step back and to work on the frog stand to understand how to balance the position with just your hands. If your weak point is the positioning of your body, so you are always in a bad position, then maybe work on the shoulder mobility and the hollow body hold, but also on holding the handstand against the wall with clean form. And that's basically everything that you need to know when training the handstand. Don't make it too complicated. Do your attempts and do your drills, and over time you're going to get better. But if you're still struggling with the handstand, just click the first link in the description and then you can shoot me a DM on Instagram. And that's it for the video. See you in the next one.